At some point in the last 2 weeks, Nigerian youth found their voice, harnessed their power, and demanded accountability from their government. It was beautiful to watch, our collective hearts swelling with pride as that fire of patriotism spread to all the corners of the country. Right here in the nation's capital, they marched with an energy, a verve, a resolve. This is the generation that will take their country back from those who have robbed and plundered it for decades. It was time. Then, tragedy struck. The country calls it the Lekki Massacre, the blackest Tuesday of 2020, perhaps the blackest Tuesday of our lives. And while the country mourned the death of its young, hoodlums took the opportunity to maim, loot, destroy, and kill, even in our once peaceful Abuja. Is all hope lost? What next for the genuine protesters? Did they make mistakes? What should the FCT administration do next? We find out together this week on Dateline Abuja. Hello and welcome to Dateline Abuja. I am Kayla Megwa. We may not realize it now, but we will never be the same again. Seeing young people, men and women, march across Abuja like that, speaking with one voice, was a light in this very dark and interesting year we have had. How successful were the protests? Well, at least the much-needed police reforms are in progress, according to the government. But what is the nation's capital doing about the panels to be set up and the rest of the demands? What's the plan to handle the hoodlums who hijacked the protests? And what about compensation for the businesses and the families affected by this carnage in places like Apo, Kabusa, and Gosa? Our feature story takes us on a journey on the NSAS protests in the nation's capital. Take a look. The Federal Capital Territory has had its share of the NSAS protests as young people took to the streets to demand actions that will end police brutality in the country. The police in the Federal Capital Territory has also been accused of brutality against civilians. The case of Ifeoma Abugu is one that readily comes to mind. Wumba village is about 20 kilometers from Abuja city center. This is where it all happened in the evening of Thursday, September the 10th, 2020. Only 28 years old, late Ifeoma Abugu had just returned from her hometown in Enugu State, where she had gone to introduce her fiancé to her relatives. The graduate of Science and Laboratory Technology from the Institute of Management and Technology, Enugu, was at home when 3 operatives of the now-defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad came looking for her fiancé, who was not at home, and they took her away.
As they came back to Abuja here, that SAS was looking for that boy, that his fiancé. As they come to the house, this is the house now, they couldn't meet their farm. Then they met my sister, who just came, because they are telling me that they are about to start a marriage course with the Reverend Father. Then they met her, and then took her away.
What do we want? What do we want?
The NSAS protesters took their demands to the headquarters of the Nigerian police. Here, they rebuffed every attempt to be addressed and demanded to speak to the Inspector General of Police.
Can you just give me 5 minutes? Okay. Can you give me 5 minutes? Hold on. I want to leave.
Yes, sir. I think if they cannot listen, it's better if they... Sorry, sir.
The protesters are demanding the immediate release of all arrested during the protests, justice and compensation for all who died through police brutality in Nigeria, an independent body be set up to investigate and prosecute all reports of police misconduct, psychological evaluation and retraining of the now-defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad before they are deployed to any other police unit, and adequate increase in the salaries of the Nigerian police. Nevertheless, the president approved the implementation of the demands, while subnationals agreed to set up commissions of inquiry into police brutality in the country. But the protesters wanted more than just promises.
Do an audit of SARS detention facilities across the country and release people who have been arrested and detained there for so long without trial, without any court order. Release those people. If government does that, we'll start to see that it's serious. You have people who are in prisons who have been awaiting trial for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. When government begins to have a conversation about how quickly can we get those people out of detention and free according to the provisions of our constitution, we'll begin to think that yes, you're serious. There have been 15 people killed in the last 9 days. 15 people have been killed. None of the policemen who killed any of those people has been arrested. The families of these people are being neglected. Nobody has been fired for those things. I mean, come on. So obviously the actions do not mirror the declarations.
While singing and dancing, the NSAS protesters peacefully occupied the entrance to the National Assembly, restating their demand. A delegation from the Senate attempts to address the youth, but they insist on speaking to the Senate President. From the National Assembly gate, the protesters moved to the popular Shehu Shagari Way, blocking all forms of vehicular movement. For a whole week, the protesters took to the streets, blocking some roads, causing traffic gridlock. However, the protest took a different dimension as some hoodlums infiltrated the ranks of the protesters, causing mayhem, especially at the popular Burger roundabout. Amidst the pandemonium, at least 5 cars were damaged, and the police reported 1 death with several injuries. A meeting of the Federal Capital Territory Security Committee reviewed the security situation with a view to address the challenges. The decision was to ban street protests in the territory, not just because of the security threat, but also to curb the spread of COVID-19. In defiance of the ban on street demonstrations, the protesters gathered at the Unity Fountain for yet another protest. This time, each of the protesters is handed a face mask in compliance with the COVID-19 protocols. They marched through the Shehu Shagari Way, which houses the Federal Secretariat and the road linking to the National Assembly, the State House, and the Supreme Court. They continue to chant their demands along the way. They take a break on Independence Avenue, which links the diplomatic zone. Here, they observe the Friday prayers. After the prayers, the protesters continued their march towards the city gate, a major entrance into the nation's capital, as well as the airport. Later in the day, the protesters converged on Unity Fountain for a candlelight procession in memory of victims of police brutality, as well as those who died during the protests. Youth in their 100 turned their attention to the Abuja-Zuba Expressway, obstructing the flow of traffic as they continue to protest against police brutality in the country. The road is a major entry point into the nation's capital. It also links the Federal Capital Territory to states in the northwestern part of the country. Soldiers mount checkpoints along the Abuja-Kefi Road to prevent NSAS protesters from blocking the road. Not minding the presence of security personnel, the protesters converge on the AYA roundabout and march through Yakubu Gowon Crescent, Asokoro, singing and chanting NSAS. As the procession gets close to the road leading to the presidential villa, policemen from the FCT command disperse them. Residents of Apo picking up what is left of their belongings as hoodlums attack the NSAS protesters in the area. The attack left the traders in one of Abuja's biggest mechanic village counting their losses. The violence also extends to Duse and Kubwa, both communities on the northeastern part of the nation's capital. Houses and vehicles were burnt, with an unconfirmed number of deaths.
We want the traditional rulers in the Federal Capital Territory, particularly of Amak extraction here, that since all the attention of the protesters and the expectant destructions are likely to be in the capital city, it is expedient on our part to ensure that the traditional rulers talk to our young ones in our various communities.
The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory leads the political leadership in Abuja on an inspection tour of the Apo community, where several cars were burnt during the violence. The team also inspects the situation in Duse in Buhari Area Council. Aside from cars and trucks that were burnt, the customary court in Duse was also damaged. The minister consoled some of those who had lost their loved ones, assuring them that some arrests have been made, while compensation is being planned for those who suffered losses. An emergency security meeting is convened with the 6 area council chairmen, the FCT Commissioner of Police, FCT Director of the Department of State Service, religious and traditional leaders, as well as heads of various security agencies. They reviewed the incidents and resolved to set up a committee to reconcile all those who were aggrieved.
We are in the process of establishing a committee where people that have grievances can bring in their grievances. They will be looked at and then appropriate action will be taken.
The administration is planning to continue a dialogue with young people with a view to meet their demands and make the nation's capital safe for all. Human rights have been a main feature these 2 weeks, so we decided to speak with the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Mr. Tony Ojukwu, to shed some light on the human rights abuses faced by the youth in this country in the last 2 weeks, the modus operandi to handle hoodlums, and if any justice can be served. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Ojukwu.
Thank you, Kela.
From a human rights perspective, when it comes to handling hoodlums, because that's what we're dealing with right now, hoodlums who are destroying businesses and attacking civilians, attacking even the very youth that we're fighting for the freedom of our country. What's the modus operandi here? Because, you know, I read somewhere that the way to handle hoodlums is brute force. I've heard a lot of people saying that in many quarters. From a human rights perspective, how do you handle hoodlums at a time like this?
Now, the Constitution...
Remember, we're not talking protesters. We're talking hoodlums now.
Constitution is the ground norm of the country. The Constitution is very clear under the circumstances under which you can use force. If there is a riot, if in self-defense, and if maybe there is a sentence by a court of competent jurisdiction, okay? Now, you must look at the situation to see whether such a situation has arisen. We had peaceful protesters, so there was no situation for use of force or to kill anybody extrajudicially. Now, the police and the law enforcement agents have the primary duty of protection of life and property. They had the duty to protect the protesters. If they were protecting the protesters in their possessions, they would have seen those ones with bows and arrows and cudgels and weeded them off, arrest them at that point in time.
Why wasn't that done?
It is pure negligence. It's pure
because I've witnessed many protests in this country, and I have seen the police protecting them. So is it because the protest was against the SARS?
Well, yes, I can also see that once the human beings, I think most of the police officers were also wary that since they were the bone of contention, maybe, but certainly the complaint was against SARS, not against all the police. In fact, one of the 5 points raised was that they should increase the salary
of the police
and welfare of the police. So everybody in this country knows the important role being played by the police. It's just that SARS went haywire. There was so much impunity by SARS, and it had accumulated over the years. So everybody was determined to get it right. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But like I said, we must all be human beings. But still, despite the situation, the police should have risen up to the occasion and provided the security needed for the protests. Especially the protesters were not armed, they were not violent. So it was very convenient for the policemen who would have been armed to protect them. And if that confidence, that could have been even part of the confidence building. I saw a video clip of a military officer who went to talk with the protesters.
Oh, yes.
And he was able to touch their hearts and minds. And you could see them, sharing some jokes, and eventually they all parlayed together. That should be one of the skills. Alternative dispute resolution skills, mediation, In
fact, one of the videos where I saw a bunch of soldiers where they were doing push-ups and entertaining the crowd. And you know what came to my mind? Also, this unit exists.
Exactly.
The ones who know how to talk with civilians exist.
All of them are given this training. All of them are given similar training.
Well, the ones who came with the guns at Lekki.
But those ones
didn't.
No. Yeah, those ones went haywire. That was crazy. That is not the normal picture of a military officer. That should not. I believe that was a one-off kind of thing, and I don't believe that it is normal or proper. So those people need to be fished out. There are bad elements in the military, and they have to be fished out and dealt with so that they don't contaminate the others. Let us not give an impression as if this is how the military of our country behaves. That is unconscionable. And
painting a bad picture of the fine men of the
whole
country.
The whole country. That should not be condoned. We should not cover them. If anybody knows them and covers them, the person has contributed to smearing the image of Nigeria. We must feed them out so that we weed them out so that we can, convince our citizens and the international community that we're a responsible country.
How should the government, back to what I asked earlier, you talked about the Constitution and what the Constitution says about the use of force when it comes to dealing with hoodlums and lawbreakers.
Yeah.
What would you advise the government to do right now with these hoodlums? How should they engage them?
Of course, the law enforcement agents must go out there. They must go out there because you cannot fish out a hoodlum if you are not there. And if they see these hoodlums wielding sticks, I could see somebody trying to break the traffic light somewhere.
He broke it.
All those kind of things.
He actually broke it.
If there were security agencies at that point in time, even if you could not arrest him by then, you could use science, you could use cameras to get his picture, and after when things go down, you go and pick them.
So not shooting them, arrest them.
Yes, you arrest them to face the law.
Okay.
And when you shoot to maim.
Not to kill.
Not to kill.
The last time we heard about the panel of inquiry, 13 states had set up these panels of inquiry.
I think they've gone up to 17
They've
now.
gone up to 17 now. Yeah. So how do you plan to synchronize your operations with what the states are planning? Actually, some activists believe that you don't have the legality to set up such a body. How do you react to that?
We have the power to set up the panel, and I can also tell you that the presidential panel, the presidential panel that gave the recommendations for the ongoing SARS reforms was also set up when there was no governing council. So if that panel was acceptable and it's legitimate, why would the panel now not be legitimate? But most important thing of all, it is a necessity right at this point in time.
So how are the panels of inquiry going to work?
Yeah, from the decision of the National Economic Council, which also as a strategy to help to douse the tension, say that there should be panels in all the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Now, that is strategic. That will help to deal with the situation. And Human Rights Commission is a member of all these panels in all the 36 states. Now, the National Human Rights Commission, of course, has set up the panel in Abuja to take care of the Federal Capital Territory and maybe some fallouts from the states, if that is possible. At the end of these panels, the central panel in Abuja will collate all, because there will be one report to the federal government. They are not going to submit 37 reports. So the National Human Rights Commission will collate all these panel reports, analyze them, and make recommendations to the federal government. It is one white paper the federal government is going to do, which will now decide on. And don't forget, the police also is a federal institution. It is the Police Service Commission that has the powers to discipline officers. The police officer, and then the Inspector General of Police office as well. And then, so what will happen is, at the end of the day, after collating all the reports, there will be one central report to the government. There will be a white paper from the government on this report, and that will decide those police officers that will be disciplined, either dismissed from service, either demoted in rank or prosecuted. And this will now be channeled to Police Service Commission or the Attorney General of the state or the Attorney General of the Federation, as the case may be. If there's going to be compensation for violations, it's going to be paid by the police. Police is a federal institution. So the federal government will decide on that. If they decide on that, they will have to find a way to help the police to get the resources to pay. So there is need to coordinate all these together and have one complete. There's no confusion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ojukwu, for speaking with us, and good luck.
Thank you.
So, there's still hope. The biggest injustice you can do to yourself as a human being is to find your voice and let life take that voice from you. If you take nothing from today's program, take this: you must win. It's been a pleasure hanging with you for the last 30 minutes. Hey, talk to us on our social media handles showing on your screen. It's a safe space, and we are always ready to listen. Remember to share with us the happenings in your neighborhood. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayla Magwa. See you next time.